and one animal evolves a little better than the rest, what has to happen to the rest of them in order for this better one to take over and cause improvement? They have to die. Evolution is a religion of death. Christianity is a religion of life. Could not be more different.
Dr. Hofmann, it's generally stated that evolution has a very difficult uphill battle against the second law of thermodynamics, that it would be very difficult for inorganic substances, that is, non-living substances, to fight the battle, to organize themselves. It would be highly improbable. So wouldn't it be then easier for something that was already 99.9999% organized to spring to life than something which started out as being totally non-organized? And so that since we have such an abundance of dead things with us ever present, wouldn't it be easier to look for an observation of some dead things springing to life, suddenly resurrecting, than to expect a prebiotic soup to become living? And and if you say that we need a lot of time for the prebiotic soup to become living, then wouldn't it?
I think I get the question.
Let them sit there,
Yeah, the better.
Yeah. The origin of life is an unsolved problem. I think the way to approach it is simply to say that the conditions under which life began are presently unknown. We don't know how life began. That's the simple answer. And that's one reason I made a distinction. All I talked about was the issue of common descent, not about the origin of life. The origin of life is an unsolved problem, and people working on it. I have a colleague who works in it, and the study of the emergence of complex systems is an ongoing field of research, but the short answer is nobody knows how life began.
The second law of thermodynamics is indeed a serious problem. Basically, it can be stated many different ways, but a summary would be everything tends toward disorder. Everything's falling apart. Nothing gets better with time. The Bible certainly teaches that. Things get worse, left to themselves. But the evolution theory does teach that everything has gotten better, that we came from a single-celled organism to a 50 trillion-celled organism called a human being. And this happens simply by adding energy. Typically, the evolutionist argument is that you can overcome the second law of thermodynamics by adding energy. They say the Earth is an open system, so it receives energy from the sun. Therefore, you can overcome the second law. Well, the universe is a closed system. The Earth may be open. It may be receiving energy from the sun. But adding energy is destructive unless there's a mechanism to utilize that energy. You can fill the front seat of your car full of gasoline, and it won't run any faster. You have to have something to utilize the energy in the gasoline, called a complex drivetrain and fuel injection system or carburation system. We added lots of energy. Japanese added lots of energy to Pearl Harbor one time and didn't organize a thing. We returned the favor, added a bunch of energy to Nagasaki and Hiroshima, and didn't organize a thing. Okay, adding energy is destructive. The sun's energy will destroy the roof on your house. The sun's energy will destroy your house. The sun's energy will destroy the roof on your car, and then it will destroy the paint job on your car. There's only one thing in the universe that we know of that uses the sun's energy in a constructive way, and that is chlorophyll. And one plant cell is more complex than a city. So the second law of thermodynamics is a major unsolved problem for the evolutionist. But ultimately, they have to believe that somehow it is overcome when there's absolutely no scientific evidence that it ever gets overcome without adding enormous amounts of energy. And I think that just by itself would completely nullify the evolution theory. Evolution theory is not scientific. It is totally religious. If you want to believe in it, fine. But don't use my tax dollars to teach that to the kids, because that's a religion.
Yes, I would like to point out that the question I raised also would have application to supposedly simple biological systems becoming more complex. And I did want to also point out that your example of the sun being a fact of the temperature in the interior of the sun, as you probably know, the 5 equations used to determine stellar interiors, the composition enters in. And of course, we can't directly establish the composition of the interior.
Yeah, I think the question has to do about how you get complexity over time. What I would disagree about and what was just said is that the second law is somehow overcome. I think, again, what you need to do is take some time to study non-equilibrium thermodynamics, study the way people talk about the emergence of complex systems. These are not simple issues. You can't simply base your life upon a few jokes and a few pictures of cars with their roofs getting burned up. You need to, if you want to understand these things, and I take it most of you do, it takes a little work. You have to look at how complex systems are being studied by people who do thermodynamics, and how they argue that when you have energy flowing through a system, it's possible for part of that system to increase its complexity at the expense of its environment. The second law is not violated. It doesn't somehow overcome. It's just that the second law applies to a larger system than the system which is becoming more complex. These are not simple issues, and I don't expect anyone to be convinced one way or the other, but I hope you'll study it further without simply seeing a few pictures and taking that to be the final word.
I think the second law has never been overcome or circumvented. If there is momentary improvement, it's only at great expense.
That's it.
Well, we're done? Okay, go ahead. Right.
I think Dr. Hovind already asked this to you, Mr. Hoffman, but how do you get something that's non-living to produce something that is living?
Well, I guess that's the same question we've had, but nobody knows. Simple answer.
I can tell you how it happened, son. Someone took thousands and thousands of non-flying parts and assembled them to make an airplane that flies. None of the parts on an airplane can fly. But you put them all together just right, it'll fly. This computer is made of 100% natural material. There's nothing supernatural about this, okay? It's a bunch of wires and silicon chips and plastic and who knows what else in there, okay? But they work together because somebody designed it. Life is evidence of an incredibly intelligent designer. And the designer not only gave us this complex world and life on this planet, he gave us a book and told us how he did it. And then he preserved that book for all these centuries so you can have a copy of it and read it. And you ought to every day. Okay?
Can I respond briefly? Okay. Yeah, I would certainly agree that you should read these books. The design of the universe is something which could very well have been brought about in many ways. I noticed in my opening remarks I denied the claim that somehow accepting evolutionary processes as God's way of creating was somehow a rejection of design. I think there's a difference between saying the universe was designed as God's thought and intention on the one hand, and on the other hand, looking at how that design was executed. The scientific evidence indicates that the design was executed through a long process of evolutionary change. That doesn't take anything away from the fact that it was designed, assuming that God designed it.
Keeping in mind that the breakdown of scientists and their beliefs is roughly over 80% hold some sort of view in a God, 40% Christian God, and that the vast majority of these scientists hold some sort of theory of evolution. I was curious if you felt that the vast majority of these scientists are either inept, I notice you use the word stupid, that they don't know their science, or is it that somehow they have been deceived, that these are people, even many of them claiming to be Christian, who simply don't know the truth?
I think there would be numerous reasons why people would accept the evolution theory. When I spoke in Russia some time ago, I spoke to 30 professors at a university there and through an interpreter. One of the professors began to cry after about an hour. He was crying. I asked the interpreter, I said, "What's he crying about?" And she said, "He's never heard the creation story. He didn't know there was one. He wants you to keep going. He's excited."